Hello everyone. Welcome I'll say this is a first attempt into having a really open conversation between Automata and Illumina about the future of genomics in healthcare. My name is Fane Mensah. I'm the strategic account director at Automata. We are a lab automation company based in London, where we really bring the complete lab workflow automation platform to the labs. And our aim is really to support and future-proof organizations by bringing their genomic testing capabilities to the next level through integrated automation, but also through orchestrating that. It's very complex. It can be complex, but if you've never heard of it, we can obviously direct you to the website and you can read more about that. But as I mentioned today, we really wanted to talk about the future of genomics in healthcare, and who better to do that with Illumina. And I'm joined today by Véronique Forrest, who is the Senior Director of Market Access at Europe. Hi, Véronique.
Hi, Fane. Nice to be here.
Good. Awesome to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. It's a big topic. I think it's a very exciting topic. Before we jump into it, it'd be great to learn a little bit more about yourself, who you are, what you do at Illumina, and maybe perhaps a cheeky one, what are you most passionate about?
Sounds good. Thank you, Fane. I lead the market access team at Illumina in Europe, as you mentioned. So my team and my role is to make sure that genomic testing is made accessible and available to patients in clinical care. So we work a lot with payers, with health authorities, and a number of stakeholders actually in the genomics community to make sure that our clinical portfolio is reimbursed across European countries. I'm really passionate about this. I think the genomic space is incredibly exciting. There's a lot already out there, but there's just so much more we can do. That's what really drives me. We're really innovative. We are really passionate about what we do. Really look forward to doing some more of this. We have lots to do. We've done lots, but we have so much more to do. I'm really excited.
Awesome. That's good. Before we talk about the future, and what we really wanted to do today is really talk about challenges, opportunities, but also areas where we could improve as an industry. It would be good to start maybe at the evolution of genomic testing in perhaps like cancer or NIPT testing, rare inherited diseases. Those are probably the three main topics. What have you seen in the last probably 5 to 10 years that are really pushing this industry forward?
Yeah, I think so. Looking back, actually, maybe we look at the present. And one thing that I'll say is actually many countries are using genomics one way or another, actually, in their healthcare systems. And so, for example, at Illumina, we have customers over 140 countries, which is obviously speaks for itself, and how Illumina has implemented genomics together with other manufacturers, obviously, who do the same. So I think in itself, we can say we're across the world. And I want to say, looking retrospectively, Europe and the UK actually have been the source of much of that and all the scientific advancement that we've seen in genomics. So it started with England actually, and the UK with the 100,000 Genomes Project, which was a British initiative to sequence and study the role of genes in a healthy and in health and in disease, actually in a healthy population and in people with diseases. And that's really created like the base for genomic testing, and how initially England has implemented this in the clinic and commissioned genomic sequencing in England. And that went to the devolved nations of the UK. Then that went to other countries like Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, and that's only Europe, but other countries that are also looking at implementing genomics more broadly in the US, in Australia, and Israel. I think that's what we've seen actually. So you mentioned non-invasive prenatal testing, you mentioned oncology, you mentioned rare disease. We see this really evolving more and more every year. It's really remarkable how healthcare systems have implemented the technology, applied this in the clinical setting. And I think European healthcare systems can be really proud of what they've achieved for implementing this innovation and making this accessible to patients.
Yeah. There are two things that you just mentioned that I found really interesting, and I want to touch a little bit upon that. I think one is obviously the advancement of technology. It's continuously improving. That means we can do more, we can do things quicker, we can do things much more efficiently. But another really important thing is that you mentioned in the UK is the 100,000 genome project. And how important is it to have such a big initiative to actually push this new way of working, this new approach actually through national healthcares?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Thank you. So I think with the 100,000 Genomes project in England, we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot on what genomics can do, how to implement genomics. And then based on that, then you can expand the use of beyond 100,000 people, which is what England and the UK more broadly is doing at the moment. So I think we've learned a lot in research as well, because we've discovered new things by doing this to inform therapeutics development, to really understand how the human body functions actually beyond just the clinical use. And you know, we see this again with England, who started this, but we see other countries, as I was mentioning in the first question, so Germany, the Netherlands, the Nordic countries, Israel, many countries are actually looking at England to see how they've done it. And so what can we learn from England? And then as other countries implement their own national genomic initiatives, then what can England learn from us as this? So, you know, one important aspect was also, besides the clinical impact on patients and on care, is having the right infrastructure in place, right? Where, you know, we all come in together with Automata, but also our laboratory customers and others, right? So how can we set up the right infrastructure to provide safe and efficient testing that's ubiquitous for all patients, no matter where they live?
Absolutely. And when you've got like an overseeing body that really pushes that through, I think it makes those type of collaborations much easier. So in Europe, there are various initiatives. You mentioned a couple, but what we've also seen is that people are just starting from themselves and not really having that government body, let's say a university hospital that says, hey, we're going to do genomic testing and we wanted to improve it in country X. How important is that collaboration between universities or between government and universities?
It's fair to say, you know, a lot of institutions using genomics, oftentimes they're academic centers, right? So they're into scientific research programs. They want to understand specific areas better, which is fine. But I think it's really important to have you know, a network and liaise with a network of institutions that do this together with all stakeholders, clinicians, laboratory technicians, health authorities, patients, industry, because we can learn so much more from each other. And you wouldn't want to reinvent the wheel, right? So, and I think also if you join forces, one of the issues we see with the adoption of genomics is there's a number of things that stand in the way of adoption. And I could bucket them into three areas that we can come to later in this conversation, but you can't tackle these issues on your own if you're just one center. So I would encourage collaboration with all stakeholders involved in the genomic community, just because we're a small community as well.
Yeah, and I think, and we can talk about those buckets a bit later, but I think also with those initiatives, everyone has got a different agenda. And obviously, yes, we do want to improve the way we do genomic testing, but there's commercial value involved, there's political values involved. If we really look at the significance and the potential impact of all of it coming together, what is that impact? What is it if we have a country X that is doing everything right, having all the right collaboration? What does that do for healthcare in general, for the people that are perhaps waiting for testing, for organizations that are looking to really personalize medicine and having really interventions drawn against that? What is the impact that people could achieve?
think as a community, I think there's a significant impact of implementing genomic testing, and I mean, we've demonstrated through clear evidence actually that genomic testing provides better patient outcomes, and it's also a more efficient way of delivering healthcare. Just because, historically, if you look at cancer, for example, historically, a cancer patient has a diagnosis. You would do one test for a genetic mutation, say for lung cancer, EGFR. If the patient is negative, then you do another test to identify another gene mutation for ALK. And if the patient is negative, then you do another test and another test and another test and so on. So what we're trying to bring is comprehensive testing upfront in the patient journey so that all this genetic information can be known as the patient is diagnosed, so that the patient can be put on the right treatment at the right time, and start, therapy as soon as possible. And that can be on-label therapies, that can be off-label therapies, that can be being enrolled in a clinical trial. But that's what we've learned. Actually, not only do you help patients' outcomes, but healthcare systems can use their resources much more efficiently by knowing all of this upfront. So I just took the example of cancer, but you could take the example of rare disease testing as well, right? If oftentimes it's children actually, and you have parents knowing that there are symptoms in their children, but they don't really know what's going on with their child. And so they go as a family to get their child tested. And it takes years and years and years currently for a rare disease patient to understand what may be wrong with their children. So it brings a lot of not only anxiety in the family, and a lot of time lost from work, and all these aspects beyond all the psychological distress. So what we try to do is do the comprehensive tests up front, so even if there's nothing you can do about a rare disease, it's just the right to know what's wrong with your child.
Yeah, and I think when you explain it, it makes complete sense, right? And we're probably sitting here like, why is it not implemented in X? Why is it not implemented in country Y? But there's so many challenges around that. And obviously you've seen it, and I think the NIPT testing that Illumina has really implemented in the NHS is a good example. Can you talk a little bit about what these challenges could be and why it is taking so long for other organizations or healthcare initiatives in countries?
So I think, to be fair, again, a lot of countries have implemented genomics, but we have so much more to do. You're right. And remember, the 3 buckets I've mentioned, it come in actually in this discussion. So I think there's just a historical issue. I don't know if I want to call it an issue, an historical topic
challenge.
Of the challenge, yes. Of just broadly the value of genomics, but the value of diagnostics. Just more broadly, I've worked in the diagnostics industry for more than a decade, almost 13, 14 years now, and in market access for over 20 years. And what I notice is still with health systems, even though it sounds logical and intuitive to pay for diagnostics, the value of diagnostics is not sufficiently recognized. And I speak about diagnostics more broadly. It's not only an issue of genomics. And what that means is that funding is not necessarily adequate for diagnostics. So this has slightly changed with COVID, because with COVID, we showed the benefits of sequencing during the pandemic. Yeah. And with COVID, we've shown that if you invest sufficiently into diagnostic, it has a value, right? Remember all the variants we used to identify during the pandemic. And without the funding, we wouldn't have been able to do it. But this funding is, in other disease areas, is still insufficient to increase the adoption of genomics in the clinical setting. And, payers, historically, the diagnostic budgets has been so much smaller than other things for a payer in a healthcare system, that they focus on other things, which is completely understandable. But I would say that, so that's one, the value of diagnostics is not sufficiently recognized. The other thing is, there's two other things that come to mind. The time to market for genomics has been very long because there's no real clear pathway from health authorities to get these tests on the market. The pathways are not really time bound. It takes a lot of time. They're not really flexible. They don't accommodate the unique characteristics of what a diagnostic test or a genomic test would require compared to a pharmaceutical, for example. So there's a need to change these appraisal pathways. And then the last but not least from my bucket would be, of course, it's incredibly important to take the time to build the right infrastructure, right? And that's where you guys come in. But having the right essential clinical infrastructure to enable the adoption of clinical genomics is really important. So what I mean by this is having the right workforce to run the test, to do the interpretation of these tests, having the capabilities to share data, store data, everything linked to digital health records, etc. So a lot of it is ongoing, but there's still a lot of things to put in place.
Yeah, no, I think that third bucket that you were talking about, on infrastructure, and it is something that at Automata we see quite often. I just came back from a lab visit, actually 2 lab visits in the last month, and you can see the massive potential, and you can see where people really wanted to go into. They have the understanding that genomics testing is increasing. They also have the understanding of the type of talent and people they might need to attract, but also the space that they need to utilize. And then also the technology, whether that's a specific kit or whether it's the data or whether it's really around operations ends of things. There are quite a few challenges in people trying to adapt to that.
Yeah.
I think that's something that you see at Illumina as well. Do you think that that's something that's really up to our vendors in the sense of educating the industry and talking about areas where we are innovating? Or should healthcare organizations perhaps look a little bit further into other industries and how they've really adapted the infrastructure?
I think, both, I think. So, obviously, Illumina is working hard with the genomics community, actually, our customers and everybody we know, to create the right environment for genomic testing based on our technology. And there's a lot of knowledge within Illumina that we can share, and we're happy to share, and we do share, to make sure that genomic testing is implemented in the clinic. But obviously we can't do this on our own, and we need the whole community to create this ecosystem. Actually, it's not just up to Illumina or a health service to do this. And again, we encourage knowledge sharing between our customers, between countries. There's a lot of great initiatives ongoing outside of Illumina with things like the Million Genome Project and others, right? And there's also a number of coalitions which Illumina is a founding member of. So things like the European Coalition for Access to Comprehensive Genomic Profiling is something where we've intentionally created an ecosystem whereby you have members of the diagnostic and pharmaceutical industry, as well as clinicians, patients, pathologists, health economists, all getting together to have a clear picture of what good looks like, and how can we advance not only reimbursement of these technology, but just the clinical implementation of it to improve patient access.
Yeah. For the people that are listening, we probably have a variety. Maybe people are more technical, people are more on the business level, operations, or in a more political setting. What advice would you give them if they are considering in future-proofing their genomics healthcare? Where should people start?
Well, I think look at what's been done and what's been successful. So again, England, a great example, but Germany, great example, Nordic countries, a great example. So I would encourage people to look at the environment and the things that have worked and the things that haven't. And then I'll go back to the 3 buckets I've mentioned before. Make sure that you fund genomics appropriately. There's appropriate funding going into this so that you can roll out the right infrastructure and make the right ecosystem around you, by having the right trained workforce, by having the infrastructure for data. That would be actually my advice.
Awesome. That's good. I hope everyone has heard that. I just wanted to go back a little bit to cancer testing, because I think that's probably one that's very close to a lot of people's hearts, and it's quite challenging to identify early, and also the personalized medicine pathway on that. In your opinion, what is the importance of modernizing this cancer testing, and how do we do that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, we've learned a lot actually, and I think, as I've previously mentioned, right? So historically, in a historical situation, we used to do one test, one biomarker. It was negative, we do another,
Yeah.
etc. And now, we have one test that looks at hundreds of genes beforehand, and you can do that test to inform diagnosis, treatment selection for on and off label therapies, and clinical trial options, as I've mentioned before. So it's important to modernize healthcare, because then we enable faster time to treatment for patients, and we make sure that the right patients have access to the right test at the right time. So I think let's not forget this. At the same time, with comprehensive sequencing, the reason why we need to modernize healthcare is we're completely shifting the patient paradigm and the patient pathways. So the way health authorities used to look at traditional testing before doesn't work anymore, because authorities, so like NICE, health technology assessment bodies like NICE in the UK, used to look at one test, one drug. And now you even have drugs, and it's typically one indication. And now you have drugs that are, for example, pan-cancer indications. So you can't look at this anymore in isolation. You need to look holistically as to how is it going to fit within your patient pathways. So we need to change the way we deliver healthcare. We've learned a lot again from COVID, but from other areas. So that means we need to revolutionize the way we look at reimbursement pathways. We need to, again, make sure there's the right infrastructure. And then we need to invest in evidence generation in partnerships. I think it plays a huge role on how we can deliver healthcare efficiently. And then there's a lot of educational work to be done, obviously, because, sometimes this ecosystem evolves so quickly, even for us who spend our days in genomics. We learn every day. So we need to keep ourselves educated on what's available and what's launched.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, back to the visit we had, I had last couple of weeks ago. I was speaking to someone in the lab, and they were mentioning like how quick these kits change and how they innovate. And I think that brings a burden onto the people that are from the scientific and technical aspect as well. Like, how do we keep up with the talent? And it's a challenge. And I think that's why I really like what you mentioned around like getting a lot of the various different bodies on board, collaborative education, making sure that we have the right talent shifting in the right areas. So I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
You mentioned quite often in throughout the 30 minutes or so that we've been talking about, we've learned a lot from the pandemic and looking back at COVID. How can we actually prepare for future pandemics? I know we talked about cancer, rare diseases, but there's so many areas where sequencing is of huge value, and definitely we've seen that with COVID. How do we prepare for future pandemics, knowing what we've done in the last 2-3 years?
So hopefully we won't have another pandemic, first of all. So that would be good. I don't think any one of us wants to go through COVID again, but I think, how do we prepare for a future pandemic is, first of all, so healthcare systems, again, they've demonstrated they can implement genomics. They've demonstrated they can do this with COVID, with non-invasive prenatal testing. So what we need to do is build on the existing infrastructure that's been built, with COVID, right? and leverage on this and improve it with not only national genomic policy initiatives, but also, again, the trained workforce and the capabilities in the laboratories, the digital health recording is really important, right? So we need to keep this database, this surveillance, this knowledge of what happens to individuals and the changes in their genome. So we need to better understand this and keep the knowledge there. For manufacturers, so like I'll selfishly speak for myself, but please speak for Automata as well. I think for us, we need to keep building high quality instruments and IVD products to the market with the evidence to support their use. We need to make sure that our laboratory customers have access to complete solutions for laboratories. And again, maybe that's where, there's some synergies between both our companies. Because, we have to build technologies where we'll know it will have an impact on patient outcomes, and they'll be cost effective, and they're safe and easy to use for our customers, so that, patients also can have an easy access to testing. So I don't know if you have any reflections from your side, actually, from Automata.
Yeah. No, I think you've raised a really good point. Collaboration and innovation, those are two things that are definitely high up. I think another thing to probably add is the cultural and the cultural insights that we've gotten from the pandemic. I think from a scientific perspective, I'm a scientist, so I've been in the lab and I've done everything. There's a little bit of a pushback when you talk about automation, when you talk about digitalization. Some people are a bit skeptic about it. But I think the pandemic has really showed us, like, hey, if we put all our heads together and we just put that into a bucket and really talk about, like, what is the actual problem that we have and how can we actually solve that? I think we come to quicker conclusions and better innovation and also quicker action. And I think in the light of a pandemic, that's really important. So to your innovation and collaboration bucket, so you've been using bucket, I'd probably like to add culture as well. I think our cultural changes are absolutely key to making sure that we get future proof.
Yeah, no, I agree. And also, I think there needs to be better collaboration across countries. So within a country is obviously would be a good start. Even locally, sometimes would be a good start, because we still struggle locally sometimes. But, at the European government level and the UK, right? So how do we share best practices? And again, COVID has demonstrated we can do this. We can share data as well. Remember the COVID pass, right? And the QR codes we had and all of this. So if we can do this for COVID, why can't we do this for cancer, for the patient passport, so to speak? When you go to a GP and you just scan your pass and they know your genomic, mutation or a genetic mutations or a susceptibility to develop a disease, etc. So that's, obviously a very futuristic vision of things. But we need to continue to invest in research and development and an environment that fosters that development and that innovation as we continue to learn more, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, Véronique, I think this has been super insightful, and I've really enjoyed speaking to you.